It is ultimately the lack of regulation at all levels of government that plays a key role in issues concerning fill.
It's safe to say that regulating and monitoring commercial fill is falling between the legislative cracks, and that's one of the reasons Earthroots and Storm are so passionate about this issue. It's one of the reasons we're here.
So what did we learn? We learned a lot. But first, it became very clear that there is no government agency that has general oversight for the management of commercial fill in Ontario. It is a piecemeal process.
We want a consistent, regulated at the provincial level, because I think that's absolutely essential, regime. We want the province to be involved. We don't want 100 different municipalities to have 100 different regulations, some strong, some weak, some just non-existent. We need that provincial protection.
Now, realizing that there's no provincial oversight, an Earthroots donor recently sponsored a study to analyze as many fill bylaws as we were able to obtain. So what we did was hire a researcher. We started to gather data to get a sense of what was happening within close proximity to the GTA. We looked at 68 municipal bylaws and conservation authority regulations in southern Ontario, centered around Toronto. The numbers on the graph reflect the bylaws in that category.
Municipalities have a large role to play in creating comprehensive, clear, and strategic policies. All of us involved in this process are, again, looking for that clarity. We think there's also an opportunity for municipalities to determine how the material is moved, who participates financially, and how the fill is managed over the long term. If you're a municipality managing fill in the Oak Ridges Moraine, where the geological deposits make your soil very permeable, you're going to have different goals on how material is managed than a municipality in the city of Kawarthas Lakes on a limestone plain with no overburden. In essence, many parts of this activity lend themselves to locally suitable solutions, and many of these will cross municipal boundaries. Municipalities working collaboratively with their municipal neighbors will find a much better solution if they manage the landscape, not the boundaries.
So how are conservation authorities involved in permitting large fill sites? We're involved through the administration of provincial regulation under the Conservation Act, Section 28. These regulations are not new. In fact, they've been in place since the mid-1950s and 60s. The regulations we deal with today, after several amendments, are more feature-based, and they also regulate wetlands as well. So the features that we regulate include the Lake Ontario shoreline, so the flood and erosion hazards associated with the Lake Ontario, watercourses, valley systems, floodplains, and erosion hazards, and there's an adjacent lands buffer that's applied to all those features of 15 meters. We also regulate wetlands, and the adjacent buffer for that is either 30 or 120 meters, depending on the size of the wetland. The regulation also specifies that if an activity could interfere with the hydrological function of a wetland, that activity can also be regulated. So there could be situations where you have large fill sites that are actually beyond the 30 or 120 meter beyond the regulated mapping that, again, could be regulated. So what this means is the regulations are really a technical document, and that they're very effective in addressing issues, again, around natural hazards and protecting features such as wetlands and watercourses. What the regulation is not very effective in is addressing what you might call public concerns. So these could include things such as consideration of the purpose of the placement of fill, what is the end land use, addressing impacts such as noise and dust, and even the whole issue about public notification. Again, the regulations are a very technical process. There actually is no provision for third-party involvement at all. So you can see that there is a bit of an issue in terms of being able to address some of these public issues under regulation. And just to highlight why this is becoming more of an issue is because under the Municipal Act, there's a provision that indicates that municipal site alteration bylaws have no effect in CA-regulated areas. So you've heard from the township at Scugog, and there are many townships throughout the GTA and beyond that have updated their site alteration bylaws to address a lot of these public concerns. Well, because they are no longer have effect in the CA areas, there's a bit of a gap there in terms of municipalities losing one tool that they can use to address these issues.
Municipalities now, of course, they do have a quite considerable, powerful. The site alteration bylaws it's a powerful tool. It has all the things. They can collect money. They can direct things. They can, really control a lot of what goes on in the site if they're willing to use their full powers. But it's the kind of cases we're talking about here, the jurisdiction is on the receiving end. right? It's only the Scugog, it's only the township here that gets it. It's not generating it, so that limits in what they can do. They can only play with the receiving end, and of course they are trumped if the Conservation Authority has jurisdictions. But the Ministry of Environment, has often mentioned this, and this is not their business. Their business is pollution and protecting the environment. And I mean, and they're limited in the powers they have to the 3 areas. One is, we've heard a lot about, I put out the adverse effect. Adverse effect is well defined in 40 years of legislation, and there has to be an adverse effect for the Environmental Protection Act powers that come into play for the Ministry of Environment to be involved. We're talking of material that does not cause an adverse effect. So the ministry doesn't have jurisdiction over most of this material. Or the material could be a waste. If it's classified, we can get it classified as a waste, then Ministry of Environment laws and regulations apply. But this is not waste. This enjoys the exemption of being inert fill. And you say, what's inert fill? Well, we don't know, but we know it's not waste. And we have this thing called inert fill. We know Table 1 is inert fill, but we don't know what else is inert fill. So Ministry of Environment, again, does not have jurisdiction over most of this stuff. We've also heard the Conservation Authority has a role. Yeah, they do. But their jurisdiction is limited to this. First of all, the word pollution that exists in Section 28. Well, if the Ministry of Environment adverse effect doesn't apply, you'd have a hard time saying you've had jurisdiction for pollution. So that's a limitation, and they certainly have jurisdictions when there's issues of flow of water that relate to the direct interests of managing the watershed. But again, there's limitations on what conservation authorities have, and of course there's some lands which they was quickly pointed out where they don't apply at all. So you can start to see why we got a problem here.